Welcome. Aloha. Thanks so much for joining us at ThinkTech Hawaii, Rule of Law and a New Abnormal. And normal is highly overrated, so abnormal is for us. And for all of you who are kind enough and free-spirited enough to join us. Both those elements seem to be fairly essential. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about not just power struggles, but power struggles and values. And one of our guests brought up this really important word that has gotten very short shrift. I don't think I've seen it in the media since before the pandemic, and it's the word dignity. We're going to talk about that a little bit. More in a minute. And to do that, we have with us Tina Patterson, whose insightful idea to actually discuss dignity in the context of all these things, this maelstrom of stuff that's going on. And David Larson, immediate past chair of the American Bar Association section of dispute resolution and esteemed professor at Mitchell-Hamlin School of Law in St. Paul, Minnesota. Ben Davis, professor emeritus from Toledo School of Law, and now visiting professor at, is that William and Lee?
Washington Lee, yeah.
Okay. And who knows where you're going next, or do you know yet?
Hey, any day, anywhere. It's like the movie, right? Everyone, everywhere.
Ben is a free agent. This is notice to law schools everywhere. Grab this guy. The Jets may have gotten Aaron Rodgers, but we got Ben Davis. So come talk to us. We'll put David and Tina in charge of representing Ben and brokering any deals.
15% each of them, right? There we go.
Okay.
15% in the midst of it. We're on the border of a recession. David, I think we need 25% each.
Yo, man.
This is beginning to sound like Shark Tank.
Not both.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's 25 for Tina, 25 for David. And that's not even counting my finder's fee. So.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well,
exactly.
I'm happy to work for all of you.
Okay, so let me ask an easy question to start us off. And we welcome volunteers, any of the three of you. Is there a place for dignity in today's power struggles?
Well, that question, I would start out by saying, with respect to the people who are fighting the power struggles right now, if I could say that, it's become very apparent that dignities are not a big part of what they're doing. That you can pick so many different areas where it's the talking point that is outlandish that people are perfectly willing to say, right? And we see a lot of that where you say, really? I mean, come on, man, really? But people try to say these things with a straight face. And then I mean, there's so many places that are things that are going on that are about sort of human dignity, attacking them. You know, what is it, the drag queen law in Tennessee, or bills against LGBTQ people and all that. But I think that the goal of those kinds of efforts is to have people be distracted by these things and not focus on things like, oh, I don't know, regulating the banks or regulating railroads or making sure that food is safe, all those kinds of things. In other words, to keep people from, government or federal or state government from doing sort of those types of tasks, we're going to get everyone distracted over here by raising all of these red herrings, if I could say it like that. And that seems to be the strategy that's here.
Yeah, Chuck, yeah, the question asked, is there a place for dignity? Which is a different question of whether there is dignity. Yeah, of course, there's a place for dignity. We have legislative processes around the country, and there's protocols and procedures, and within those protocols and procedures, there's obviously places for dignity. You can have a harangue, you can make it very personal, and you can have a rant, or you can have a respectful conversation. So I guess as a lead question, is there a place for dignity? Absolutely, there's a place for it. The second question is, where has it gone? And I think that's what Ben's getting into is that it's disappeared because people have decided that an effective way to get what they want is to distract and divert. And if we can amygdala hijack and get people reacting emotionally instead of intellectually and rationally, we might be able to achieve our goals.
No, and that's a great insight. Tina, your thoughts?
I have to say I agree with David. I'll take it one step further. Your question, is there a place for dignity? I think the reason that we're seeing some of these power struggles is because underlying it is this idea of, in order for me to be successful, I have got to make you lose face. I have got to humiliate you. I have got to make you appear less than. And so the dignity is underlying, but it's literally stripped out of the conversation, and it becomes a conversation, a struggle of one-upsmanship. How do I get ahead of you? How do I position myself in a way that either sounds more appealing, that it attracts the fear, the underlying concern? So yes, dignity is there, but it's literally on the back seat and sometimes literally pushed out of the conversation, or it's there and the individuals or groups involved recognize it, and the best way to go about moving ahead with one's position is to disgrace the other. It's about the other. Who is the other? If you're not with us, you're the other. It's us versus them, and dignity is lost.
No, those are great insights, because it sounds like one of the things we're seeing, which is pretty frightening and disheartening, is beyond just the wealth and power struggles, becoming a zero-sum game where those in wealth and power only keep and only gain at the expense of those who are not, the excluded, the marginalized, the oppressed. It's now extended beyond that to human treatment, just how you treat people. It's never been necessary before. I'm old enough to remember people like Sam Irwin and Bob Dole and Gerald Ford and others who, Hubert Humphrey. I don't ever remember any of those people behaving or communicating in a way that I remember coming across as undignified. On the other hand, there are people out there now, I can't think of a time when they did come across as dignified. And they revel in that. As one late night talk show host put it, he said, you hear these people say these things and you think to yourself, how stupid do you think we are? And they hear you ask that question, they come right back and say the same thing. That's how stupid they think we are. So the question in November, in the even numbered years, is how stupid are we really?
Yeah, I think a good question is, where has dignity gone in the age of social media? Now we have tremendous media coverage, and one of the goals is to get as much media coverage as possible. And so what kinds of stories get covered? Well, the outrageous stories get covered. So if you want to get a lot of attention, many people believe that I've got to be outrageous. And so that becomes my goal. When you talk about dignity involves respect. And right now we're kind of losing the sense of that. There's a sense that if I can silence certain voices, that's how I can retain my power. and I can do that lots of different ways. And I can censor people, for example. We look at what's happening in our schools, and Iowa and other states have had laws that say that you can't teach that the United States is fundamentally or systematically racist. You can't even say anything like that. So there's a real movement now to censor voices. So instead of respect and at least listening and evaluating and critiquing and exchanging ideas, the idea is that we are going to eliminate voices. And we can do that lots of different ways. We can do it through legislation that prohibits certain kinds of speech. We can take away votes so people can't vote, make it difficult to vote. We can silence them that way. So when we talk about dignity, I think an essential part of dignity is respect for other voices. And we're seeing movements now that are not respecting other voices, that are instead trying to silence them.
And that reinforces your point, Tina, that for the power elite, if you are different, if you are other, it will be at your expense. It will not only be subject to censorship prohibition, but also to pretty severe punishment. 21 Florida legislators have now come out with a bill to make abortion, was it Florida? I think so, subject to capital punishment.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just the prohibition of censorship, it's the extremity of the punishments. And they're being put in the hands of a very subjective few, whether they're parents or certain legislators or others, school boards.
Chuck,
Where
see
are we
the
headed?
sentiment? Where
Yeah.
are we headed? I think it's seeping. The behavior that you're talking about is seeping into other areas. It's seeping into the workplace. It's seeping into our economy. I know before we started today's session, we were talking about the failed banks, and the banks that are failing are not the ones that are at the national level. They're the ones that are a tier below. And part of that is recognition of what those banks, the regulations that are applied to those banks, and individuals saying, I want my money, and not realizing what their rights are, what their rules are, what the regulations are concerning those banks. I was listening to a news story, and the person said, and again, this is information that's available, but if you don't know about it, or if it's not shared with you, you're not going to know that the regulation is different when we talk about national banks than it is with a mid-tier bank. And these individuals not knowing what the insured requirements are through the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation or through the National, what do they call it? Credit Union Association. What's safeguarded? And people saying, this is a travesty, but it's a travesty because people don't know what their options are. And there's this shame factor. Why would you use that bank? Well, I use the bank because it's closest to me. I use the bank because the fees that are associated in doing business with them align with my lifestyle. We also see this, and when I say in the workplace, we would think with the advent of COVID, with people literally working offline, that they would feel more comfortable. But the Institute of Workplace Bullying talks about how more people feel like they are being harassed by their employer or their supervisor. And it's not the one-on-one phone call, it's in Zoom sessions where people are being dressed down and made to feel less than or being humiliated. It's the instructor who has a class and uses a term that would be considered inappropriate, but they do it because they feel that no one's going to say anything and, it's not recorded. So I see how it's seeping down, and for our younger people, it's distressful for them. For older people, they're trying to navigate how can they be a proactive bystander and speak up, knowing that, especially in the workplace, they could in the long term be impacted. They could end up being some type of retribution, or in what I have heard from people, that they've become the outlier in the office. They're no longer part of the in crowd or told what's happening.
A phrase that's been tossed about is that we're living in the age of immunity. Maybe one of the costs of living in the age of immunity is that we're going to lose dignity. If there are no consequences for bad behavior, for offensive behavior, for hurtful behavior, maybe that's where dignity goes to die. And that's something I've been thinking about and very frightened and disturbed about, this notion that there aren't consequences, that we have pretty clear evidence of bad behavior and unlawful behavior, and it doesn't seem that people are being held accountable for that. And if you don't believe you're going to be held accountable for your bad behavior, maybe your desire and interest in acting in a dignified, respectful manner goes away.
Yeah. I'm agreeing with both of you to a certain extent, but there's some things that are kind of nagging at me that I think that part of what's going on is that cruelty is being legitimized. Okay, that being cruel is okay, which the way a lot of us were raised was that being cruel to others was not something that was socially acceptable. But I think that cruelty has become a feature, not a bug, so to speak, in a lot of settings. And you see, always with some terribly noble principle being asserted in the background, you see a lot of cruelty that's being done. You know, last week I saw a complaint filed by 5 women in Texas about what they'd gone through with their pregnancies, okay, under the rules in Texas. To read what they went through was horrific. I mean, not just like, oh, too bad, but horrific, okay, under the rule that's there. And of course, the rule is put in place in this idea of, protecting the unborn and all that stuff. But when you read what these women went through, I don't know any human being who can't say to themselves, it's horrific. So then the next level becomes, well, the hospital didn't understand the law. No, the hospital tried to analyze what the law said and acted accordingly, okay? And so I don't give the people who wrote the law, the pass of saying that people just didn't understand the law. There's another case I just read about, a lady in Florida where they won't do what they should do medically because of the law. The doctors have told her straight up, and it's just horrific. I look at the situation with regards to Jackson in Mississippi, where people are trying to take away the power of the people of Jackson to actually elect the judges. In other words, the normal way that is so be centralized by the state, I think the attorney general and the governor. It's cruel, okay? I mean, when you think about Jackson, Mississippi, and the problems of water that they had there, when you read about the money that was supposed to go to poor people that was used to build a volleyball gym for Brett Favre's daughter down at University of Southern Mississippi, you say people who do those things are just cruel. I mean, there's no way you get around the fact that they just wanted to be cruel to poor people. And this was money that was supposed to go for poor people. These laws that are trying to basically outlaw LGBTQ, it's like, why are you being cruel to these people? Or drag queen, this whole drag queen nonsense, which is quote unquote to protect children. I'm not worried about drag queens with children, wherever the problem's been with people with children. Seen a lot of situations of sexual abuse of children in churches, right? You know what I mean? I mean, that's been a real problem. It hasn't really been addressed well enough. But, it's just a level of finding somebody to be cruel to. I can speak about, some people call the anti-woke thing is just basically the new version of anti-black. You know what I mean? I mean, it's just the same game, just put another word in so you don't have to use that word. But, the anti-CRT, I mean, look, I went to school in elementary school in the 60s, right? Most of my life, as I've been going along, I've been learning how much of what I was taught was nonsense. And it seems like what they're trying to do is have everybody go back to learning the nonsense as the way of seeing the world, as opposed to learning the complete nature of the history that's there. Or diversity, DEI being blamed for a bank. I want to tell you, when I was in business school back in the late 70s and 80s, and Japan was number one because of the production stuff, I remember in my classroom, the production professor saying that one of the reasons America had gone behind was because there had been these women coming into the production workforce, and there were these minorities coming into the workforce. Yeah, I mean, I think it was even in the book that we used in the class, right? Sort of like, if we'd only just had all us white guys here, this would have been okay, right? The fact that it was a white guy, W.E. Deming, who had taught the Japanese about statistical process control and just in time and all that stuff, and they actually took the ideas and made it work and made factories more efficient than Americans had ever dreamed of, completely left to the side, just like, and I'm like, the cruelty is just amazing. I mean, it really is.
So why do we have so much more cruelty now? I think one of the reasons is that there's a real perception that I'm losing ground, that the establishment, the people that really have benefited from misjustices in the past are coming to the realization that demographics are changing, that power structures are changing, and that maybe, and this may or may not be true, and maybe their lives may be enriched if they'd simply open up and be more accepted. But the kind of the controlling paradigm is that we're going to lose, and we're going to lose a lot, and we're not going to be able to retain for our heirs and our legacies what we were passed to from our parents. So that justifies certain kinds of cruelty because the stakes are really high. I'll package it in a way that doesn't sound so cruel, but let's not forget what our goal is, and that's to preserve the status quo and even maybe roll it back a little bit. So, so why is cruelty happening? Well, I think it's happening a little bit out of a desperation or perceived desperation, maybe an artificial desperation, an idea that this is a fixed sum and that, it's absolute win or lose instead of any possibility of enrichment and growth. But you're locked into this idea that I don't want change. I don't want expansion. I'm going to lose. And if I have to do it in ways that hurt people, that's okay, because then maybe I'm not getting hurt.
Well, and those are really, really important insights for all of us, because they remind us that while there may be political hay to be made in talking about rate changes in violent crime or street crime or whatever, maybe the much more important factor is the instances of humane treatment, the bullying that you talked about, Tina, not only in the workplaces and the schools, but out in life, in our professions, in the examples Ben gave in the healthcare industry, and it's being weaponized. I come from a medical family. If anybody had suggested when I was growing up that 4 doctors could sue to stop the distribution of the most widely used abortion medication that's been in and on the market successfully for over 20 years, that would have been inconceivable. That parents could make teachers change the way they teach, the way they communicate, the way they treat children. Uvalde was not just a violent crime. It was an inhumane treatment. And all of these at their root, exactly as you've intimated, these are not just inhumane, these are racist. For DeSantis to pick a group of Central American immigrants, send them up to Martha's Vineyard, was not just a political ploy. It was pure racism, the way he treated those people. They were nothing. They were a means to an end. He really didn't care what happened to them or to the people that he dumped on the doorstep of Vice President Kamala Harris. This is a truly inhumane person. And I still remember our Hawaii senator and Brian Schatz telling me why he had so much hope for Joe Biden in the 2020 elections. He said, you know, Chuck, anybody who's known Joe Biden and he's been on the political scene for 40 years knows he's a decent guy. They will attack him politically, they will attack him in any other way they can, but not as a person. He's a decent guy. You know, he may not be everything we need at the time we most need it, but we've gone in a much healthier direction in the last 2-3 years than we have before that. The inhumanity is not a forefront element of this administration. In fact, if anything, the opposite. How do we support that? How do we make that the tide that carries us?
Take a stab at it. All four of us are members of an organization that this year has committed to cornerstones of democracy. And part of that is civility. And the civility, and I say this often, the civility is not just us interfacing with the public as members of that organization, but how we treat one another and how we emulate the cornerstones of democracy, whether that's telling people about the realities of voting and why it's important to vote, telling people that they need to know who's on their school board, and if they aren't engaged, why aren't they? And they don't have to go to every meeting, but learn, ask the critical questions, show up. I mean, I'm a former planning commissioner, and I would hear people say, oh, this project, this just came up. No, it didn't. It started 3 to 5 years ago. We looked for feedback and people didn't come. So we assume because we've done the outreach and no one's responded that it's okay. If it's not okay, it's perfectly fine to voice your opinion. That's part of that dignity. We want you to be heard. And I know when I was a commissioner, I wanted to hear that you didn't agree with an application or a project and why. And of course, tell it in a meaningful, truthful way for you, not the hyperbole of, oh my gosh, this developer's trying to kill my family. That, you know, tell me you don't like it because your children play at the playground across the street. It's that type of rhetoric in terms of the civility. It's also knowing that what's going on. You've mentioned, and I tell people, you know, are you ready for 2024? And depending on the person, I get well, what's in 2024? It's a presidential election, folks. Get ready. We're going to see in the next 3 to 6 months, things are about to change. We're going to see people come forward jockeying for position. You know, it's that type of knowledge. So, you know, I hate to, then your cat's cute. I hate to think of it as being something that's far away and remote. It's not. It's something that we can get involved with now, that we, all four of us, and educate our colleagues, educate our peers, but educate our neighbors, talk about it, you know, and why you need to be engaged. So I'll stop there.
Hey, David, any last thoughts?
Yeah, I really like Ben's idea. You know, he cited those 5 instances in Texas. I think one thing we really need to do is to publicize the consequences, you know, to follow through so that legislation gets passed, people get hurt. We need to hear those stories. We need to know what the real consequences are. So I think we need to make a real effort to pay attention to what are the negative consequences, what have we lost, and to publicize that.
Great. Ben, last thoughts to wrap us up?
I I agree with everyone. I just want to say is that if, as you're going along, you find yourself being quote unquote played by somebody. In other words, you thought this was going to work this way, and then you find out that something else was going on. It's not your fault that you're getting played. It's their fault for playing you, okay? And you in your good faith trying to make something happen. Because I've been played many times in my life, and I go, oh, that was, they played me very well there, okay? Congratulations, But notwithstanding that, I think speaking up and, talking with others, and I'm a real believer in holding people accountable in the sense of if you're not happy with what they're doing, vote them out. I mean, really, just vote them out. I mean, take your vote and you say, well, my vote doesn't matter. Well, if they used to win by 60%, now they're winning by 51%, they get a message. They get a message that something's happened. And obviously, if they lose, they get a real message, But if you just do not vote, that I think is unfortunate. In addition to that, I would just add that in your places of where you are, to the extent possible, you should model what you want to the society to be by the way that you act. And that may be difficult, at times. It may be very difficult sometimes. But I think that when people model that, the sense of human respect for each other, things like that, is transmitted, and it changes the energy in a space. I'll give you a simple example today. I mean, I went to send a package to my stepdaughter up in Canada at the post office, all right? And I did the standard box thing, and I brought it to the guy. The guy said, wait a minute, I think I can do something for you. And he goes in the back and finds a box that puts it in as opposed to the standard package, and it saved me $25. He doesn't have to do that, but he did that. And it made me feel so good about him and that post office in that moment. It was, and it's these modest things. Maybe it's because I got the gray hair now. There's a poor old guy, let me help him out. I don't know what it is. But whatever it is, it's like there are so many times there are these things like that in your day. Or sometimes when I go to buy coffee at a place and they'll say, hey, the coffee's free. Okay? Because that's the only thing I'm buying, right? It's a nice thing. And it shows a kind of gentleness and respect towards you, and you reciprocate with them, and modeling that as opposed to other things, that seem to get popular in the news, I think is something that we can do, every day in how we operate in this life. That being said, I know at times that there can be angry or rage, okay? And I'm still working through how I deal with anger and rage. I happen to have a cane, and apparently I try to keep it down, but apparently unconsciously I start slamming the cane when I'm speaking. And I was like, interesting, So it's like how to channel that rage or channel that anger when you see profound injustice, oppression, suppression, and how to do something to change it. I don't know the answer on that, but I'm not one who's going to say don't be angry or don't have some rage, because there are things that are worth being angry about. Or as Fannie Lou Hamer said, she was sick and tired of being sick and tired, right? That is a healthy feeling, and it's just trying to find a way to make things better in how you act yourself and how you hold others accountable and call them out. I think so. I think calling them out's a good thing to a certain point. But what do I know? I'm just a guy sitting here at the table with the cat. But really, the feeling I know those moments when somebody like that guy at the post office treats me in a way that is recognizing my dignity, and it makes me feel good.
Fantastic.
And,
Tina Patterson, Ben Davis, David Larson, thanks so much. May we all remember the cure: compassion, understanding, respect, empathy. Come back and rejoin us in a couple of weeks. We'll be here, continuing our search for dignity.
Thank you so much for watching ThinkTech Hawaii. If you like what we do, please like us and click the subscribe button on YouTube and the follow button on Vimeo. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, and donate to us at thinktechhawaii.com. Mahalo.